Welcome in. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth about the div element today, and then the specific types of div elements that will help you complete assignment number 4, which is due Friday. It's a practice assignment, and it's in the process section, so it's a little bit... It doesn't need to be so formatted like your About Me pages, but we'll have a project that we'll use with it a little bit later. Before we do all that, which means you also need to have your snake games closed, that I can see multiple Google Doodles. Thank you. Your entry task has a little bit more detail on it today, and you have a little bit more time to complete it because it has 2 parts. And one of them is, hi, welcome in. One of the parts of your entry task is using the sheet that I've provided with you, or you can use your own. I'd like you to sketch an aerial view of a house with a yard. So don't forget your name, okay? You can put whatever you want inside your house with a yard. I've given a couple examples down here on the first set of bullet points. So if you want to have a section for gardens or farms or animal pens, if you want to have different workshops, different sheds, garages, if you want to have tennis courts, basketball courts, pickleball courts, cricket, I think they're called pitches in cricket, any fields like that, any pools you want to have in your house or your space, you can include that, and then anything else not mentioned you can have. The purpose for this is to think about sectioning again. Think about design. Think about how you're grouping your web design pieces together in a space. Okay? So to actually post this, I can see your drawing already. That's perfect. Keep doing that. I'm just going to finish up real fast. To post this, it's 2 parts. I will take your sketch, and you need to choose one of these 4 questions below to answer on the actual entry task. And I have a little bit more time set up for this one so that you have some time to give it detail. Okay? Does that all make sense? All right, perfect. I'm going to start a 10-minute timer, so that puts us at 12:23, and then we'll get into the PowerPoint and the other stuff that you should have access to on Canvas. Okay? So your entry task, using paper, sketch an aerial view of a house with a yard, and there's more details on the discussion board. Join the screen share, please. It's been sent out. If you're playing Google Doodles, don't. Or if you're playing Microsoft Surf, don't do that either. Even though it's not a Google Doodle, it's close. Let's talk a little bit about why you are drawing houses, okay? Why is the entry task related to positioning things together? Because, spoiler alert, a majority of web design is looking at the vast amount of different things you can put on a page and then putting them in a specific order that is unique to you from an artistic perspective and functional to others as a tool perspective, okay? If we look at a website like YouTube and then we look at a website like Canvas, the people who have designed those sites have a specific look in mind. That's why the 2 websites look differently, behave a little bit differently. That's the personal touch of the designer, specifically how they've laid out the pieces and what the pieces look like. Canvas, on the other hand, while a totally different website that serves a totally different purpose, is still used by a lot of people and needs to be easy to understand how the pieces work together. Okay? That's a majority of where your artistic choices get to come in as a developer, as a web designer. And that's the main focus of our div, block level, inline elements, and different parts of the page that you can see on resources that we're going to go over today, as well as all throughout the semester, or the rest of the semester. We're just getting introduced to them today. 2 things I want us to get good at, or at least start getting good at today, are practice creating web page folders. All the code you've written thus far has been in just kind of a loose HTML document. We're going to make a folder for easier saving, easier organization, and it allows you to start having multiple pages on your website. And then we'll have a lot of practice time today with the div element. One is I'm going to tell you the difference between a block element and an inline element. Important things to note that you have already seen, but maybe don't have the words for yet. Those are my main 2 things we're going to get done today, or at least go through today. Okay? Your outcomes, 2 major ones. You improve your website's arrangements, and you're starting to think from a design/user experience. That's what the UX letters stand for, user experience perspective. You'll have a better understanding, or at least the start of a better understanding after today. The assignments that need to be completed by Friday are div practice, assignment number 4. I'll go over that here in just a second. The methods of which you complete that assignment are nesting elements inside of each other, Remember, that's what a container is. You put things inside of the website container. You nest them within the parent. Styling a specific container, like I did on my super brief demo the other day. And then we're going to start using design-specific thinking. How do you want your page to flow? There's an acronym called PARC, which is proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast. And we'll get into that as the course happens. But if you've heard of PARC before, you can use PARC.
Corresponds to K. Corresponds to C.
It does.
K.
In this acronym, because C stands for contrast, so it's the hard C sound. That's why we have the PARC right here. And we'll get to slides 7, 8, and 9 a little bit later. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is a way that you're going to change up how you create a web page. Because there's a specific way I want you to turn in assignment 4 that revolves around this process. So you can follow along with me. You can follow along with the video later. But what I'm about to show you is creating something called a root folder. Okay? In basic terms, every web page you've ever used technically sits inside of a folder on a server. And that folder is like an entire cookbook, plus an entire kitchen, plus all the tools needed to cook whatever we're trying to cook, right? It contains everything the website needs to function. Canvas has got one, YouTube's got one. Those are going to be my 2 big examples today because I've been using them quite a bit. Okay? And I know we all use them as well. They've got a folder that lives on their server somewhere. And we're going to start by creating one of those in our OneDrive. So we can start organizing and storing and having multiple pages on our websites. So you want to go to your File Explorer. You can find that by clicking on your Windows button or just on the yellow folder. And then you want to look for, in the destinations on the side, yours might look a little different than mine because I've got a bunch of stuff on here. Okay. In the destinations, you want to look for the OneDrive, right? You should be synced from a while ago. Your computer should be good at remembering where your OneDrive stuff is at this point. I'm going to have a ton of stuff in mine. You might not have as much as me. Okay. The important thing is that we're going to create a new folder right up here at the top. Double click, you can see it's right there. Or you can right click anywhere in the empty space with your middle finger and go to new, and then folder is another option, okay? I know we've all created folders before, but I wanna make sure you're putting it in the right spot for my specific web design needs as your teacher and for continued practice, okay? The naming scheme that I have used that's working really well for me is date, class period, and then like specific project, because when you submit it on Canvas, it automatically adds your name. So I'm going to call this 2026 because that's the year, a period, 0224 because that's today's date. I'm going to put a little dash on there. You don't have to do it exactly like me, but this is the way that works well for me, and it might work well for you. To separate the date from the class period, I put a hyphen or a dash, call it P5. And then I'm going to put one more dash. This is going to be the type of folder that this is, related to either the project you're creating, either the company or the contract you're working for. Later in the semester, we'll get some contract options, quote-unquote contracts for you to complete. Point is, you want the last part of your file after the date and after the class period to be related to the assignment. So I'm just going to call this A4 or A4 practice or something like that. Okay? And then I'm going to hit enter. Now we've got a correctly named file, or a correctly named folder. If we double click, it's empty, right? Basic folder stuff. The reason I'm showing you this is because I want you to see how I organize my files, because the more organized you are as a developer, the easier it becomes to find all of these very tiny little Lego pieces that get really easily lost in your OneDrive, okay? The first step is creating this folder, and for basic HTML purposes, we also want to add a little folder inside of this folder, nesting it like we would a paragraph element inside of a div container. We're going to go through that same process, but we don't need all the date stuff. Just call this all lowercase public, okay? You should have a folder inside of a folder. The public folder is the child of the 2026 February 24th A4 practice folder, like so, and they're both empty. The important part right now is that they are both empty. You will get a lot of practice with these steps because the template that we get to use a little bit later in March will be pre-configured, but you won't always get a pre-configured template outside of the classroom. Sometimes you got to make it yourself. Sometimes you got to know how the pieces work together, especially the nesting order. So I can show you how they work in the div space. Okay? To get this folder where we want it to in VS Code, again, remember your computer's very literal. You have to tell VS Code exactly where to look. And another benefit of creating folders like this is your VS Code gets a little easier to use because it doesn't have a whole bunch of junk in there that we don't care about. Let me show you what that looks like. By opening up VS Code, by clicking on my Windows button and typing VSC, if you haven't done that already, this is my example that I've been using thus far, okay? Let me close my terminal and close my other stuff. Okay, perfect. Now, if you click up on this very topmost button, it's the top of the order because it's one of the most important, very important thing to maybe keep in mind as we talk about different arrangement methods, is the Explorer. You're going to see, or you should see, if it doesn't say your OneDrive, you should see a blue button that says Open Folder. In doing that, it's going to automatically close any tabs you have open. So I want to hit this and Control S, make sure that it's saved real quick, or I can go File, Save. But I want to click on my Open Folder button and open up that A4 practice folder we just created. Okay? I'm going to open it. It's going to give me another file browsing window. I want to go to my OneDrive right up here, and you're going to see I have a folder for every year, but this example one is right here, and we know how to find it really easily because it's got a lot of detail for us to look at. Click on it one time, then go down here and click on Select Folder, which will open up, kind of refresh your VS Code, and ask you this question: do you trust the authors of the files? We trust the authors on folders that we've made because we are the authors, right? We know that there's not anything scary in these. If you're using VS Code outside of this classroom, just keep in mind, like when you are trying to definitely not download free movies, that you got to click the right download link, okay? Sometimes you'll get a folder that might not have the best type of stuff inside of it. So if you're doing something that you're a little worried about your computer being compromised, you don't want to trust the authors, it will keep it kind of quarantined on your computer. But since that we are the authors of this folder, we're going to go ahead and trust it. Okay? And you're going to see up over here in the Explorer the name of the folder and then anything that lives inside of that folder. You can tell what a folder is in VS Code because it has these little arrows next to it. And when we create different files inside of our folder, inside of our little, kind of like a packet, kind of like a binder, right? A specific binder for a specific task or a specific notebook. Everything stored within there stays within there, ideally. And you can tell folders because they have these little triangles, at least in the basic VS Code setup right here. Why we're changing to a folder-based approach is because with folders, with these completed binders or these more put together binders, you have more accessibility. You can do more with your pages. You can connect more things. You can make it more functional. You can make it cooler, more like the web design or the websites you're used to using. So why do you care? What's the point? What we're doing with this folder is we're going to create a new HTML file inside of it. You can see that my folder is blue right up here, making it selected. Let me get my thing is not working. There we go. So it's blue to select the parent folder, not the public folder. If you do select the public folder, it's not the end of the world. But, come on, do my thing. There we go. Blue folder up top. New file, same way we've been doing it. Creating a new file, selecting a language, going down to HTML, and starting it off with our normal HTML stuff, okay? So we're going to go Shift, comma, HTML, Shift, period, Enter, and then I'm going to add a head and a body so that you have two different containers for us to experiment around with, okay? Shift, comma, HEAD, Shift, oh, not Shift, that's a question mark. So if you mess up, it's totally fine, like I've just messed up. If you go Shift, comma, it's going to give you a suggestion on what it thinks is going to come next. So we want a /head because we want our head container. We're just going to leave that empty for now. If you ever want to leave something blank, you can put a hashtag in it, especially for styles or sources or URLs. You can put a hashtag. That will act as a placeholder. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my body, BODY, Shift, period, and then Enter. Now, how can I tell if I've saved this page or not yet? Can anybody tell me? Yeah, Audie. There's a white dot right here. Okay, so to get rid of this white dot, we're going to go to File, Save As, instead of just Save. We're going to Save As so that we know for sure on the first time where our folder's getting saved. This is a way for me to double check that it's in the right spot by using this thing up here called the path. Okay, you see I've clicked on it. If you click on it, it looks a little different. This guy up here, this is like a URL on the internet for your specific images. This is where your folders live. Okay, so, or this is how your computer reads data. I can see that it's in my 2026-224 A5 practice, and I'm going to give it a file name of, specifically, there is a correct name that it should have now, INDEX. Because your index page is also your home page. It's the first thing the computer loads when you do something called a call. Okay, so when you load this file, the computer's going to look for the index folder or the index first, and then whatever else happens after that. We'll click Save. Okay? So that makes sense so far. What you're going to see over on the Explorer side, on the left-hand side over here, is an index.html file has appeared inside of our container, which is cool, right? Anytime you hit Control S, it's going to automatically sync to this saved folder on your OneDrive, and you have a backup copy in case you need it. So, what I'm going to show you now briefly is assignment 4 and a couple different types of tags, and then I'm going to give you some time to experiment. Okay? I know I've been talking a little bit longer than I planned to this morning, so we'll go quick. If you look at Tuesday, you're going to see that there is assignment number 4. It's resource section number 2. By Friday, I'd like you to submit your practice using div elements here, but as a folder upload. I'm going to show you how to do folder upload a little bit later in the week, okay? This assignment should have at least 5 block level elements, at least 5 inline level elements, at least 3 web page sections, and at least 2 images. And you can see that the rubric matches that, so you can see how many points you get if you have some but not all, or if you're missing them completely, I cannot give you points, okay? So, if you're curious about the difference between a block level and an inline level element, I'm about to show you, and you can find both of those in resources, items number 3 and number 4. Okay? So, let's first talk about block versus inline. I saw some people browsing this already, and I'll give you the quick version because I know you can read. The basic breakdown is a block level element takes up the entire width of your computer screen. Okay? So for us, this is 1920 by 1080. For this is like 1000 by like 2300, right? Let's see what's on here. For this is like, I don't know, some amount of ratio. All of these things, all of these different screens can also be called your viewport, otherwise known as VP. It's important for some later on styling. So your viewport, a block level element, is going to take up the entirety. Corner to corner, maximize it out. Div at its basic level is a block level element. And the definition of a block level element is it creates a new line every time you create one. Or you add one into you add a sandwich of that style, a block level sandwich, onto your HTML. 2 commonly used block elements, as you can see right here, are paragraph and div. So if I go back to my HTML over here, inside of the body container, on line number 6, if I add some paragraphs, paragraph 1, something that we've done plenty. Let's add 3 paragraphs total, P shift period, paragraph 2, shift comma, P shift period, paragraph 3. Okay? Because a paragraph is a block level element, each one of these 3 paragraphs on lines 6, 7, and 8, 6, 7, and 8, are going to create their own line. Okay? I'm seeing who's paying attention too. They're going to create their own line every time, which if you go to the run and debug button right here, and I'm going to choose edge, you can see on my viewport right here. Okay? Div is also a block level element. So if I create a div, you can also type out the name of the tag and hit enter. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. For containers, we want to create another line so we have actually something inside of there. All right, I'm going to hold Control and press X on my 3 paragraphs, and then Control V to move those paragraphs inside of my div container. And then I'm going to click my green restart and see that nothing's really changed. However, if I go into my div tag on line number 6 and I add a style attribute, remember style or attributes are things that go inside of a start tag and influence the way that they work. If I add a very quick, if you want to copy exactly me, border needs 3 pieces. It needs a size, so 1 pixel. It needs a style, which is solid, and it needs a color. I'm going to go with black. Okay? If I Control S and then click my refresh and go to my viewport, you'll see that div, because it's a block level element, is taking up the entirety of the viewport. And if I resize my viewport, it's going to keep taking up the entirety of the viewport, okay? Or of the screen. That is your, if we go back to assignment 4, your requirement for block level elements. And I've linked a bunch, and there are some more available to be found on W3 Schools. So if block level takes up the whole viewport, what do we think inline elements do? It's the opposite. Any thoughts? What do we think an inline element does if a block level element takes up the entire viewport? Sai.
Try to put everything on one line as much as possible.
Correct. Everything on one line as much as possible. Another way that I like to think about it is they only take up the amount of space that they need. And the most commonly used inline element is the letters SPAN for span, because they only span what is required. Okay? So if I...
And they don't do anything unless you define otherwise.
Exactly. Yep. So a span, S-P-A-N, this is one with a twin. We're going to call this span 1. And I'm going to add a border to each of my spans by taking this style attribute, adding it to my span attribute, and making sure that oops, I did it wrong. Why has this happened? Oh, I forgot the quotes. That's why. So the quotes need to go here to contain everything on the span. So if we look at line number 11, which looks very similarly set up. Oh, actually, let me copy and paste these first. Sorry. I'm going to highlight this whole element, take the start tag, the attribute, the content, and the end tag. Remember the whole sandwich. Add a couple more of these. Update the numbers so that I don't have to type all that out every single time. Control S, refresh. Now, before I show you my viewport, before I show you my output, because span is an inline level element, is it going to take up the entirety of the viewport? Yes or no? No, exactly. What do you think it's going to look like? They're called inline elements. That might be a little bit of a spoiler. They're in a line. They are exactly in a line. There's our span 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Everything that you can find to complete assignment number 4, assignment number 4, div practice. 5 block level elements, 5 inline level elements, and I'll talk about web page sections a little bit later today. You can find all of your block level elements on here. You can find all of your inline level elements on here because it has a bunch of examples underneath the subheadings. Okay? What I'm going to be checking with Jake as we're walking around, as well as Miss Cameron, are 2 main things. First being, have you put together a folder and opened it in VS Code? So not if you're snaking nor popcorning. I'm almost done. Thank you. Lock in for just 2 more seconds. First, have you created a folder and an index page inside of that folder? And have you started experimenting a little bit with divs, with paragraphs, with spans? This is a new tag I've taught you. Adding a style like so. That's what I'm going to be checking for this first part. We're in here till 1:30. I'm going to talk about sections at 1 o'clock. Okay? You have 15 minutes to get started on assignment number 4. Before we do that, are there any general questions? We can help you with specifics at your desk. All good? Okay. Cool. I'm going to cut this video, and we'll pick it back up at 1 o'clock, okay? 1 o'clock, I want to talk briefly about specifically a thing called semantic elements, okay? This is kind of a vocab word. I'll be using it a lot throughout the semester, so you don't need to memorize it immediately, but we will be using this kind of idea quite a bit, okay? If you go back to your home page and then go to Tuesday's resources, you're going to see that there is another W3 Schools right here, number 4, called semantic elements. A semantic element is a specific type of div because HTML has come a long way since the late 60s, early 70s, I think is when it came out. Maybe that's a little too early. But HTML has been around for a while. It's been updated quite a bit by the WWW, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, World Wide Web. Anyways, it's the people who say how the internet's supposed to be, at least from a coding perspective. If you click on semantic elements, you're going to see this helpful little demo right here, or this helpful little layout right here, that talks about specific types of divs that help your site get arranged. Okay? This is why I had you on your entry task imagine land with pieces on the land, because each of those different pieces, different pools, different garages, different sports fields, different etc. stuff that you can have around a house can look like a different type of semantic element. And the reason they're called semantics is because so many people were writing divs with specific jobs, like an ID of navigator, a header, a footer, etc. And so they just decided to put them all into one specific thing to help you skip a step, okay? And most frequently, you're going to be using something called a section. Here's some examples of where you could use a section. So if you were perhaps writing like a wiki for a character that you really enjoy, a piece of media that you really enjoy, you can have sections serve as chapters, and then each subheading under those chapters, kind of like if we imagine Wikipedia, each of those can be separate sections. And you'll see that there's an example right here with a section containing a heading, a paragraph, the section ends, another section containing a heading, a paragraph, and then when it ends. And if we go into the try it yourself, it just behaves like a div, which is one of the confusing parts about semantic elements. But it helps you as the developer, because these things take a long time to get completed. And these things I'm talking about projects, especially if you become a developer for money, a website developer for money. When you go back to read this code, you'll know that this section, specifically because of the heading and the content in the paragraph that it contains, was related to World Wildlife Federation's or Worldwide Fund for Nature's panda symbol, okay? Section is one of them. There's also an article, which is going to separate things a little bit differently, self-contained. If we look at the try it yourself right here, you'll see that these are just a little bit shorter, and it keeps them all nicely organized in these buckets. So much of web design sectioning is putting things into buckets. It's stacking divs on top of divs. It's getting those divs to move around with each other. It's making specific articles, specific asides. There's headers and footers. But I think most importantly is probably going to be your navigation. And that's the type of section that I want to show you at the top, because nav will allow you to start having other pages on your website. Okay? So here's where my example's at with what I've shown you so far. Before I start writing the code, one of the confusing parts that you'll get used to is that most of the time when we write, like an essay or a text or an email or whatever, we start at one end and work our way to the other. You don't have to do that in code. You can bounce around. You can start at any point. You can add things after the fact. You can move stuff around. You can go all the way back to the beginning, add something, XYZ. I'm saying this because there's a specific thing called a call stack, okay? A call stack is when you make a request for a web page, it's going to read this recipe from the top to the bottom, which means whatever elements you put closer to the top of your stack are going to render first. So if you put your contact info, if you're perhaps making a web page for your photography, okay, if you put your contact info way at the bottom of your call stack, your users are going to have to scroll for a while before they get to the most important part of your hiring process, is getting hired, right? Getting contacted. And I bring that up because we're going to create a navigational element. I always like to start them at the top of our pages. And very simply, the nav semantic element goes inside of the body, and it is just the letters NAV, short for navigation. Okay? So shift comma, NAV, shift period, enter. Now this doesn't have the letters, the name div, but it is a specific div with a specific purpose. And that specific purpose is navigation. And you can find the different types of specific purposes by reading about different semantic elements in HTML. Okay? What we're going to put inside of our navigation container here, inside of our semantic element for nav, is a couple different anchors. Can anybody remember what the tag for anchor is?
A.
It's A, exactly. What does an anchor look like on the page? What's another word for an anchor? Sometimes they are in bio, or they are the protagonist of a certain Legend of Zelda. They look like links. They look like links, okay? So we're going to go shift comma A space. What is the attribute that an anchor tag needs? It's 4 letters. Hi ref, I heard it, right? HREF, okay? Now I'm going to put hashtags inside of these quotes because we do not yet have something to anchor to them, okay? And then I'm going to go shift period, and I have a correctly configured start and end tag for an anchor. What is my anchor missing on line number 7? Think about the user experience. What does the user need to have in order to do anything on a website? It's a C word, 2 syllables. These are a type of creator on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram. Yeah, Joey. Content, exactly. So it needs some type of content inside of our start and stop tags. Remember, this is the sandwich metaphor. We're just going to call this a couple different frequently used parts of a web page, okay? Like a home page. I'm going to click on my number 7, Control C, Control V, 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 get a bunch of them on here, and then I'm going to change my content as necessary. Maybe we call this one contact, maybe we call this one about, maybe we call this one info, maybe we call this one gallery, and then maybe we call this one free V-Bucks. Okay, so we get a click off of our users, all right? Got a bunch of anchor tags with a bunch of hashtags in the href. Hashtags are going to be our placeholders, okay, because we will use these a little bit later. And I do want you to do this part of practicing this semantic div creation, okay? I'm going to save my work, Control S, then I'm going to double click my green restart. And when we go to our output, you're going to see something that you see very frequently on other web pages, navigational links, okay? And these links can take you wherever you want your user to go. So for example, if you were running a scam for free V-Bucks, you wanted to get the user's information, you put some type of user information gathering link inside of that href. I have no idea where you find those, and I've never done that before, so don't ask. What are you noticing? Look at lines 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. What do you notice about them? Are they all on their own line, or are they all stacked up with each other? They are stacked up in the stack, right? They each have their own line in the call stack, okay? What do you notice about them in the output? Is that the same? Yes or no? The output is this guy, where it says home, contact, about, info, gallery, free V-Bucks. Are they in a line, or are they all on their own line? Anchor is another inline element, okay? Navigation is a block element. Almost all containers are blocks. Almost all small pieces of code, like an anchor, little tiny tools, right? Like an anchor, like an image, etc., are inline level elements. And when you combine them together, you get these separate sections. And an important thing that you can add to your semantic elements is a style attribute called padding, right? When you get a package, and there's something inside the package, what's in between the thing and the package? A certain type. It rhymes with schmubble schmap. Right? It's bubble wrap. It's the example I'm going with is bubble wrap. Wrapped around the thing that's inside the package, you can think about that like your HTML elements. Okay? Our nav semantic container here is like a package in the mail. And all of our anchors are the actual package itself. If we add, hold on, actually let me rephrase that. I had it backwards. The HTML document, the body, is the container that holds, or the package that you get in the mail is the HTML body, okay? The nav is a piece inside of that box. The div is a piece inside of that box. And all of these spans are other pieces inside of the box. We ordered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things from Shmamazon, okay? If you add padding to any of these containers, it's going to increase the amount of bubble wrap that you put around those items inside of the package. Okay, let me give you a visual example of that in case my metaphors are not working. I'm going to go inside of my nav container. Because it's a parent, it's going to put its genes down through its children. And I'm going to add a style equals, very simply, padding, I think I do, a colon, and then I'm going to set it to a pixel value or a percentage value. Let's go 10 pixels of padding, okay? Control S, because I have my colon and my semicolon to tell my computer to start and stop reading. Watch what happens to this part of my output. Watch what happens to my navigation section once I refresh this, all right? It gets a little bit more bubble wrap put around it, okay? And for example, if I make this padding 1,000, how many pixels is that? 10,000 pixels, and I refresh, it's gonna really cuss up my viewport a little bit. I don't even know where everything went. It's so big I can't even access it. This is how far I have to scroll. There we go. So this is quite a bit of padding on our navigational element here. Let's keep that. Let's do 100 because 100 is a little easier to see on my projector here. Okay. Refresh. There we go. So now you can see that there is padding around the outside of this navigational container. Okay. Why am I showing you this? What is the point? Why does this matter? This is your first time practicing arranging your backyard and arranging the parts of your house in specific ways, just like you did on your entry task. All right? You're experimenting with nesting here. You're experimenting with cascading style, which is CS of CSS, not Counter-Strike. You got divs. You got block level elements, you got inline level elements, you got a correctly configured root folder. Y'all got through a lot today. This was a big day. And you're keeping up, which is the other really impressive part, which you should be impressed by, is what I mean. Okay. We have about 15 minutes left before you do your exit task. 5 is what, 12? 12 minutes until your exit task. What I want y'all to do is first remember this isn't due until Friday. And second, let's finish off the PowerPoint because I want to go over the tracking your progress. Okay. So, how do you know you're getting it today? How do you know you have what I want to teach you? You understand how to create and configure a folder. If you don't get it exactly today, that's fine. You're going to get lots of practice. You know how to create and configure a div, both the basic version and a semantic version, like a navigation. And you can tell the difference between block level and inline level elements, why you would use them, and what their functional difference is. Okay? Finally, why are we doing this? Because sectioning is key. Key to your user experience. They need to know how to use your website without ever having used it before. Imagine if someone told you to fly a rocket ship tomorrow, you probably wouldn't know what to do because that's very advanced. However, if someone said, use a fork tomorrow, you might know how to use that a little bit better because of the way that they're designed. Human brains always look for patterns, so you want to make your patterns clear. You can also take advantage of some psychology with those patterns and use them to your advantage, specifically for stuff like advertising. This is SFC for short form content. Think about ways that TikToks or Reels or YouTube Shorts, etc., keep you on the app. That is patterns that the developers are using. You can sell things, so Like for example, when I do my grocery checkout or my grocery pickup through QFC, before I pay, they always ask, hey, do you need a little bit extra stuff? I don't need that, but it makes me think for a second, maybe I do. And then QFC gets more of my money, right? So you can sell things. If you choose, once you're of age, to make the choice to gamble, a lot of sectioning and a lot of parts of the way the website is laid out encourage you to keep gambling, etc. And this gives your pages a more professional look and a more professional feel because you're being intentional with them. Instead of just messing around, now you know how the pieces are starting to work together. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. I'm going to talk about the exit task in 10 minutes. You got 10 minutes to save your work, keep experimenting, add some style, add some more elements, check your A4, ask questions of me or Jake as we wander around, and we'll talk exit tasks the last 5. Okay? Okay, gamers, last thing I need from you today in the last 5 minutes while I help a couple different questions that are out. For your exit task, I'd like you to compare your web design knowledge from the start of class, meaning the start of semester 2, I should have been clear on that, to now. What changed? How much have you learned? What have you kept? What makes sense? What doesn't? Tell me that on your exit task. And also once you bring your sketch up to the turn-in table, you can take your phone, but you still need to answer the exit task for points. Okay? Last thing I need you to do today.